Hey guys, so it's another exciting day here at Mute Me. Today I'm working on something special. If you've seen my last videos, you'll know that I've been working on what we call the Mute Me Click. It's a new Mute Me device that's going to give you, 4 degrees of control. It's going to give you your end call functionality, your raise hand functionality, your camera functionality, and then of course your mute functions all in one device. And in order for us to be able to save money and be able to, produce this device at cost, we're using a lot of our components from our existing device. We're using the outside shell. It took us forever to get this right, and so we don't want to spend time to reproduce this part or have to produce something similar. And this is a polycarbonate shell. It's extremely strong. I'll stand on this in one of the demonstration videos, and you'll see how strong this is. It's actually extremely strong, and a lot of people tell us how the device is super light and it feels cheap, but you can stand on our device. It's actually that strong, and it's really because we're using much more advanced materials than what a lot of other manufacturers or a lot of other companies use. And the reason for that is because we were a small startup company. We had a lot of pride in our work, and we decided to just go out and do things a little bit differently. But now in retrospect, we're like, maybe we should have gone with the cheaper plastic just because it doesn't really need to be this strong and this scratch resistant. And so it's extremely scratch resistant as well. In order to make this work, we have to change out the PCB. And so what I'm doing today is I'm actually taking a new PCB, a PCB that hasn't been worked on yet. It's missing its main chip, and this is a prototype PCB. It's not one that we're using for anything else. It's really just for our testing purposes. And I'm going to go ahead and break this out of here, and then I'm going to solder on a basically a microchip. So right now the microchip is not on there, and so we just snap this off. There it goes. Comes off. We have our PCB. We're going to go ahead and get it under this microscope here, and then we're going to use what we call a solder paste. And so this is a solder paste here, and a solder paste is basically tiny metal fragments suspended within what's called a flux, and so it's like a paste, and it's the tiny little metal pieces. When heat is applied, they actually melt. And PCB boards have a layer of film on them which resists, and it doesn't like to interact with the metal pieces. And so the metal pieces, once they start to flow, when they turn into a liquid, because we get them hot enough, they flow and they'll go and make contact with the other metal pieces, but they'll beat up basically, and they'll go make contact with the other metal pieces. And that works perfectly when you're soldering something so small, it's even hard to see the pins. And so it's going to be hard for me to show you this. I'll just have to show you under the microscope, but these microchips are tiny. So let me see if I can hold this camera up to the camera. So that's how tiny. I don't know if you can see it there even. I don't think you will be able to see it even if I bring it in. So it is extremely small, the microchip. It's 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter. And so when something's that small, you're not going to be able to hit all, and there's 20 different contact points on there. You're not going to be able to hit all 20 contact points with hand soldering it, with a soldering iron, right? And so you can't use a standard soldering iron and be like, oh, I got this, I'm going to hit every little 20 point, I'm going to hit all the 20 points and I'm going to get it. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to do it. So what you do is you apply solder paste very, very conservatively, just a little bit, because the contact points are so small. You have to be very careful with that. That's actually the hardest part. And then you hit the board with heat. And so sometimes, in this case, I'm working under the microscope just because it's such a small one and I'm only doing one. If we were doing more than one, I would use our reflow oven, and I would use the microscope to place the microchip and then throw it in the reflow oven, and the reflow oven would do the rest of the work. But because I'm only doing one, I'm going to hit it with hot air. So in this case, all of our soldering paste, it all has temperatures and requirements and specs. And so we know what the temperature that it starts to flow at. And so we go above that temperature to basically hit it with hot air at that higher temperature. It causes the solder paste to reflow and start flowing. And then our chip will actually float on top of those metal, and there's metal contacts on this side, there's metal contacts on the bottom side. Both of those have been exposed to a little bit of what we call flux, and that flux helps basically deoxidize the metal. And so the metal is now, it's very exposed on both ends. And so when the solder paste starts to flow, the metal between the solder and the metal and the contact points will actually be attracted to each other, and it'll pull itself into place. And so that's the only way you can solder something this small. I've got new equipment now, so we've got microscopes, we've got hot air stations, we've got all this stuff, but I've done this in the past with nothing more than a smartphone and a hot air gun. Not recommended, but it can be done even if you don't have, all the appropriate tools. But having the tools just makes it so much easier. Once that's done, then I'm going to take that PCB, the one that's completed, similar to this one, and I'm going to ship it off to Bovin, who's our lead developer. And so that way he can start seeing what I've done on the firmware side. I'm going to share with him like a firmware map that tells him exactly what the firmware is doing. But it's nice to give him something that he can work with as well, just so for testing purposes, it just goes much faster. And so, and plus sometimes there's like things with timing and things like that just, he may not be aware of, or it may not, be as clear or as evident when you're just looking at a specification file. And so by having an actual physical device that's going to behave how the real device is going to behave, it makes his job easier. So that's what I'm doing, trying to get this done for him, get this out to him so he can start working on the software side of things, because this device is unlike our existing device. And so we can't just use our existing software. There's going to be some changes that have to be made on the software side in order to, account for those new functions like raising your hand, ending the call, your camera control, for example. Once I get this done, I'll be shipping this off to him. And that way I think I have 3 prototypes now. And so 2 prototypes, one prototype is going to be for Ty, and that's going to be the actual finished prototype. So he always gets the nice stuff, and it's mainly because his stuff's going to be in video. Sometimes his stuff is not as functional, but it always looks the prettiest. And so it's because he's going to start making the Kickstarter videos and start making the other content and some of the pictures and taking some of the shots. So he'll get a prototype here very shortly that helps him with that. Bovin's going to get the most functional prototype with respect to what works and what doesn't. And I always have the most hacky prototype. And so, the one that I have usually has pins and things that are bent on it, or things that are soldered on, or things that are, where we're changing some component or we're testing something. And each one of us plays a different role. So as the hardware guy and the firmware guy, I can totally do that and know that, this is exactly what this device is doing. For Bovin, he needs something that's as close as possible from a functional standpoint to the production version, and Ty needs something that's close as possible to production from a visual standpoint. And so each one of us needs something a little bit different in order to make sure that we can all do our jobs going forward. So that's what's up next. Other than that, it's been a pretty, crazy day, just like always. I say that on almost every video, and it's because we were rolling passwords this morning. We were updating server stuff. We were changing credit cards over. We were doing all kinds of stuff, like an administrative side. And then, of course, I was doing some stuff with the studio. There's still some work that needs to be done. And so I was doing some last minute touch-up stuff. Next week on Wednesday, it's going to be our first podcast. And so I want to make sure that we have everything done. And we're waiting on 2 parts still. So it seems like everyone's starting a podcast right now. And so a lot of these parts and a lot of things that we're looking for are just out of stock. And so it's been hard to get some components. That's what's going on today. So doing this, some administrative stuff, got some stuff with the studio stuff. And then, of course, at the end of the day today, I'm going to go ahead and switch back to software and help do the regression testing. I didn't get to it the other day, or yesterday actually, when I said I was going to. That's my update for today. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. This is just, I've said this before, but it's a hardware channel. I'm putting out this vlog just to share my journey so you guys can see what I do on a day-to-day basis, to see what it's like to work for a hardware startup. This is very real. It's not, and there's no fluff, there's no pretend. It's excruciating and painful sometimes, and sometimes it's extremely rewarding, but that's what it is. And I just want to put this content out there so you guys can see the journey, learn from the journey, see what I'm doing, and go from there. We're also going to start putting out some higher quality content going forward. So we're going to start putting out content that gives you more of an ability to learn, not just observe. And so that's coming, but this is kind of a good way for me to start. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Share with your friends if you feel like it's interesting. And I'll see you in the next one. All right, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.